All right, so
Episode 6.
episode
Take two.
6. Episode 6. So
Yeah. Have you been being a better being?
being a better being. Yeah, so I had a altercation, not an altercation, situation with my mother that was very challenging. And it's one of those ones where you think like you're keeping your stuff together.
Yeah, right.
And,
You're acting in integrity and all the things we try to do.
Right, and I've found, not to go into details of the deal with my mom, but basically she said some words that she was unhappy with some things. We can talk about these, in depth someday actually, but she was unhappy with some things basically going on in the school, and I felt like she wasn't being congruent with her actual beliefs, and it was something that she's picked up from watching news, and she says she disagrees with these things or like kind of attack them, and I'm thinking like that's not what you actually think, and then we kind of talked it out, and for the most part I was correct. That's not what she thinks.
Interesting.
But it was really interesting because she immediately had pushed my buttons, so to speak. And
and you couldn't help but say something.
Yeah, and so I probably I did not behave the way that I would like to. So that's the last episode that we were talking about. We should talk about the present moment here, and
Right, because that's what that conversation happened in the present moment.
right, and so the thing that that I say in my book about the present moment is that we have this moment to demonstrate our true nature, and Neil Donald Walsh, author of Conversations of God series, he says it this way. He says you have to demonstrate, or you have this moment to demonstrate who and what you want to be. That's
Interesting, because that implies the future.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you kind of have it. That is interesting.
I never thought about that. But anyway.
So, and who you want to be, who you want to demonstrate, right? And so you can start being whoever you want right away.
Yeah.
That's the way. See, that's kind of okay. So
that's good. That's really cool. Yeah. So people that think I can't change, it's like, no, you can start changing right now.
Right. You start it right now. And so this is interesting, dude, because this is not, of course, we want to talk about the present moment today. But the idea that a lot of people have heard this, and you'll see it, and then people will disagree with it. They'll say the fake it until you make it.
Yeah.
But what I think that really means is like you have. It kind of got lost. The better way to think about that is that you kind of have this ideal of behavior, and that you have to start doing it right away. So you're not faking it, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be it fully. Just for me, like to me, I felt like with my mom, I was not
perfect
demonstrating. Yeah, I was not demonstrating the behavior that I would want. I was not patient with her, and I wasn't, as understanding of her position, or that I didn't express that correctly.
Right, you just didn't say it effectively
to her, right? And part of that, of course, is that it's my mother, and I'm probably more comfortable with my mother than any other person in the whole world, including my wife.
Right. But you also have the history, and the kid roles have gotten different. And
right.
So there's a whole lot of things going on.
Yeah. So dude, for the present moment, what do you think about the present moment?
Well, you said a whole bunch of things that made me, that idea about we can't change, because a lot of people think we can't change, and so they use that as sort of a barrier to ever being any different than you are right now, which is funny because it implies that now is forever. But I think most of us, my dad said, and many therapists have said, anxiety is thinking too much about the future, and depression is thinking too much about the past. And so those are like two big driving, I guess, ways of suffering that people do. Because we talked about that in the past. Like those are problems that we have, right? Anxiety and depression. And so being in the moment, or focusing on the moment, reminding yourself that sort of is a way of avoiding or dealing with or addressing. So that's where it sort of hits my fun buttons. Why I think living in the moment is important and useful, but like you said, you can't. That's all you can do. You can't We don't have crystal balls. We don't even know what the future is. And all the CBT therapy stuff, the cognitive behavioral therapy stuff, is related to future and past projections, basically saying, well, your problem is you're not living in the moment. You're catastrophizing a future situation. You're worried that the plane's going to crash. You don't know. You don't have any control over it.
Right.
And something you said in the past too, we only can control, our thoughts, our actions, and I guess that means now.
Right. Right.
Because who knows what you're going to feel like in 30 minutes. So I think it's critical. I think it's a wonderful topic of conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So, dude, I really like starting that with the idea of that when you're thinking about the future too much, that's anxiety, and too much of the past, that's depression, and that leads to suffering, which, of course, that was like a main goal of my book of what kind of suffering can I eliminate that is caused by a human, in which case, it's caused by me.
Well, yeah, and it's
to myself.
Because you said, like you said before, you can only control yourself.
Right.
Your actions anyway, so.
Yeah. So to me, that starts with becoming aware of your thoughts.
Right, like episode.
Yeah, one of those.
Yeah.
One of those early episodes.
We've talked about it before.
And of course, we say this all the time, but because your thoughts lead to your words and or actions.
Yeah,
right?
And your beliefs and all that stuff.
Yeah, and you have to so you have to become aware of that. And so one thing I always wonder with present moment and presence is, so a lot of times we hear the word mindfulness. Mm-hmm. And so two things. One is, is mindfulness almost overused now?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, classic semantic jargon thing, right? We use it so much, and it's the go-to for everything that we don't even remember what it means.
Yeah, and so that it start meaning a lot of things. So the one thing that I think of mindfulness as the awareness of presence in action, right? So the presence of my mind, that I am aware of my thoughts, and then in action, I'm doing it as I'm going through, like,
right.
So I'm aware of that as I go. It's interesting what you brought this up right before we hit that old record button, but the present moment is just so popular, and probably the most. I don't know, is he the most popular right now, Eckhart Tolle?
Well, The Power of Now, yeah, that's the classic. For me, that's what, I'm reading an article, they're talking about present moment, I'm like, okay, here it comes, pull out Tolle, right? Which is funny because I knew a woman in my past she was a PhD student in psychology, this field, and she called him Eckhart Toole. Oh, yeah. Implying that she did not like what he had to say very much. Yeah. I'm not really sure, but so I take it, he read when you got that kind of hate, you must be a guru. Yeah.
Right. He stirred her up. I'd be curious of why she did not like him.
I think it was just because he was so popular.
Yeah. So I think the idea of present moment and mindfulness, which those two just obviously just go so hand in hand. It's so beyond Eckhart Tolle. There's and I mean I'm sure there's a myriad, but Be Here by Ram Dass.
Yeah, right.
How to Be Here by Rob Bell and The Naked Now by Richard Rohr were all some of my favorite ones on the present moment. But those are all ways to say that. And the other thing I find it interesting is how much it comes up just in everyday life that we don't even aware, and I'm not even sure that people realize that they are working on the being in the present moment. Like, right. So coaches, like, all the time are like, we're going to take this one game at a time, one play at a time, totally. And that's so important, to the thing where even if they're not back home reading Eckhart Tolle and Ram Dass, or whoever, or going to... or purposely meditating, right. Which we'll get to today, that the coaches a lot of times are preaching that,
Well, it's it's like it's as ubiquitous as making a list, right? Yeah. I mean, when you're breaking up this some expanse of time into smaller and smaller moments, which occur in the now.
Right.
You
right.
knock something off your list, you do it. You're doing it now. That's interesting. Like, so unconscious, like unaware of the fact that we're being mindful and living in the moment.
If you are, one of my favorite like little cartoons of it is Calvin and Hobbes, and it says I suppose it's Calvin talking, but or it doesn't really matter though which one. We're so busy watching out for what's just ahead of us that we don't take the time to enjoy where we are.
No, it's I mean, you talk about like wasting your life. I mean, yeah, if you want to get to the 30,000 foot view, I think about that all the time. It's like, what has happened in the last 30 years, and how can I avoid, missing out on the next 30 in some way? And again, we're human and we do things, and it's not 100% of the time, but we all certainly know people who struggle with this more or less, and some people who live like seemingly 100% of their lives in the future or the past, and that just, I can recognize that as being something I don't want. But how good I am at it, I struggle.
So do you think some people mistake, though, living in the present moment, like what that means, for like being like greedy and selfish and just going for the pleasure of the moment?
Yeah, there's always that, right? I mean, because you can't, right, something I thought of when you were talking a second ago is you can't really live in the moment, because then I would be on the street in a pair of shorts and flip-flops, and then all of a sudden it's December and I don't have any money or a place to stay because I'm busy living in the moment. I don't care what happens. So that's one thing I think people do is go, that's unrealistic, it's absurd, it's potentially selfish. Because I have known, when I think about the selfish people I've known in my lives, the ones I've loved and liked, but have just been like, wow, they're really living in the moment. Is some the way I would describe them.
So I think what happens, right, is that we mistake. So that's where we still just mistake or we don't understand that, like, that we're all connected and we all interdepend on one another no matter what. So we still have to, I don't know if the words, maybe the great word is responsibilities or personal responsibilities. Maybe duties would sound better to people. Maybe people would understand that better. But we have duties to fulfill. And so you can be present doing the duties, doing the things that are necessary for survival and that participate in the collective moving us forward collectively, right? And of course that's hard because I don't think you can always know exactly what action is not harming somebody else.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And doing it.
I know we've mentioned this before, but it's all about intent.
Right.
Like, what is your intent? I can see where you could describe someone, even like, a monk or someone, you could describe them as being completely selfish. Oh, they're just living in their little religious, spiritual moment to get their own pleasure out of that and ignoring the rest. And somebody else could say, oh, look at them. They're teaching the rest of the world how to live in the moment and sacrificing. It's all, what do they really want?
Yeah. Right. So it's interesting on the perspective of it. And I might want to come back to that. But let's just talk about, so for you, this is something that has developed over time, correct? That you feel that you do a much better job now.
Is developing. Well, it's funny that we talk about this today because I'm having a slump, which is really probably perfect.
Sure.
I feel like I'm in a slump, right?
Yeah.
I used to think about it in music. I'd get in a rut. Like, I just feel like I'm not getting any better. And the awareness of not getting any better, whatever that means, makes me feel like I'm getting worse. And so it's like this, sine wave. So, I think overall, in the grand scheme of things, I have learned to use meditation to be mindful and sort of apply that model at a bunch of different elements of my life. And I think that one of the net results of that is to not worry so much about the future and the past, which renders me living more in the moment. Right. I don't think I make a concerted effort to try to necessarily I should appreciate this right now. I do some of that. But I think I've achieved, and I want more of it in my life, and now that I'm in this sort of rut, I feel like I'm sort of doubling down a little bit, no, this is important, and this was working, and so I continue it, and it will continue to be good. I'm not going to quit and be like, oh, this is all BS.
Right.
All of a sudden.
I always think that, so a lot of people will say, that they're not, they can't meditate. Is what they'll say.
Yeah, sure.
They'll say they can't meditate. And usually what I find, and it might be a very small activity for someone, admittedly. But most people have something that they're really good at focusing their attention on. And they would really probably get into a meditative state. Now,
Yeah.
I don't think, I mean, I'm not here to really like talk about the exact what brain waves that would be going on,
Science,
the neuroscience behind it, right? But you probably have something that you become, if nothing else, it's a single pointed focus. Or if nothing else.
Well, I think the best example is driving. I think most people have had the experience of getting somewhere and being like, how did I get here? What just happened? I know I just drove for 30 minutes, but I don't really remember it.
Right.
That's kind of it. But I think it's dangerous, too, to sort of use that as your explanation of what meditation is, because then that becomes the goal. And then when you don't do that, you feel like you fail. And that's a big problem I think I have. It's almost like the intro part of meditation for beginners is a bad thing, because you will have moments of clarity, like flow states, like you describe, and be like, that's cool. And then it has the potential to create the effect of, I want this every time I do it. And it just doesn't work like that. I mean, it would be like expecting every athlete to hit home runs at every at bat or get knockouts every whatever. It doesn't work like that. I don't think the goal of meditation is what you're describing necessarily. It's an awesome artifact, like a little bonus thing that happens every once in a while. But my experience with a lot of it is you sit up feeling not necessarily worse than when you sat down, but
is that when do you feel worse though? Is it as simple as you feel worse because you have put an expectation of what you think is going to be the result or what could be the result of meditation?
Exactly.
And then you're disappointed, so you've judged it as I judge this as disappointing because I didn't get the exact thing. And so what I think happens, and so when I was saying about like somebody is, so they're in and I wouldn't even necessarily call it a flow state, but I guess I'll say a single-pointed focus state, if nothing else. And debatably, that could be a meditative state, debatably.
Sure. I think it is.
And they have something where they have focused their mind. And so by focusing their mind at that time, they have eliminated what might be called the monkey mind. Or somebody called him
the roommate.
Mind grapes? The roommate, okay. So that's good.
Oh, the internal dialogue. I mean,
I've heard the retrobate. In the retrobate in my head,
right.
And then Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. and the Toltec would be the Metote, correct? And that's the 10,000 voices, or 1,000 or whatever.
Yeah, well, and that right there, I think, is a reasonable goal that doesn't have the potential to. I just hate the idea that people try new things and don't have good experiences, and that leads to an exacerbated condition of why they did it in the first place, right? For the example I think of is somebody who goes to therapy, tries really hard, doesn't feel fixed, and then feels like they're a bigger failure than they were in the first place because they just put in an effort to do something that's supposed to help them and it didn't.
Right.
So, in a way, my big concern with meditation or therapy or any of that stuff is that newbies are prepared for that and don't feel discouraged because of it. That's the only thing I was saying, if you don't look at it as like being a guarantee to get to flow state.
Right.
And I know I'm sort of...
So let's talk about some other ways then, or like, so you can expand on that and I'll bring up a couple other ways of thinking about how to get towards what could be considered a meditative state.
Or living in the moment.
Living in the moment.
Or being in the now or whatever.
Yeah, being present. Yeah, and maybe that's the way we should say more so is living in the present. Let's throw out the idea of the meditative state or the flow state.
Yeah.
And just think of it as present moment. So how did that even start for you? Like, what did you...
Well, I think for me it was anxiety, right? It was like, how do I get out of... And it was the basic CBT stuff. Where you learn, some examples would be like, a big thing I did was catastrophic thinking. Like, I can't possibly try something new because I'm going to fail and vomit all over myself and embarrass myself and then feel terrible and not want to leave the house. Like, I would just, any little possible bad thing would just like be this avalanche toward what's the worst possible case scenario. And then you learn that I can't predict the future. I don't know the answer to these things, and all of that brings you back to the moment, right? And the way to solve that problem is just to stop the future. And many of the CBT, there's like 8 or 10 things, all or none thinking. Of course, I can't think of any right now. That sort of puts you. So
all or none thinking, catastrophizing is one specifically, right? Yeah. So
that pushes you back to the moment. That's where I first learned about sort of not really understanding that I can't do anything about the past or the future. So why?
Right.
Why am I worrying about
it? And here's another thing I think that this would be like almost maybe a myth of the present moment. Maybe that's almost what we're talking about. Some myths of the present moment.
Like just making it more real.
Yeah. Is and this goes with what we were talking about of like the idea of like I just do what only I want in the present moment and I don't plan for the future or whatever.
Right.
That's not being like you can be in the present moment. You can be planning for the future. I'm planning a vacation in the future, so I got to have details. I need to make the airline flight. I need to book the hotel.
I need to eat tonight.
Right.
Need to get food.
Where am I going to eat? What am I taking on the trip? What are we doing on the trip? All of those things. And certainly I can be present in the moment doing it. Now, this was interesting.
Yeah, that's very true.
And so I was just away for a week myself. And right before we left, my wife was packing her toiletries, which it was quite the impressive bag, I'll add. And she knows that. She'll own that. And, but it was interesting because we were pretty much ready to go, but that was like pretty much the last thing she packed. And there was a couple questions that I had for other things that came up. Mm-hmm. And it was like I ruined her presence, right? Like I interrupted. Like,
jacked up for planning.
Right. She was kind of focused at the attention or at the time. Yeah, I knocked her out. And then we got there and we were like, hey, where's the Q-tips? And she was like... That is your fault.
So that's funny. Oh,
yeah.
That's really
so
funny.
I think though a lot of people think like, oh well, like you're living so in the present that you're not aware of the things you need to do at the moment. Like you're not taking. Again, it goes back to responsibilities or duties. You still can do it. It's just that you're planned and you're focused. And I think another example is, dude, if you and I are chatting on the phone. And inevitably, a lot of times we're still going to be around a computer. If we get a message, you might get it from your daughter, from your wife. I might get it, from my wife, or maybe, like it's a question from a gym member for me or something like that. If I get that instead of like not paying attention to you for the moment, I can not pay attention to you by saying, hey, Chris, I need to answer this real quick.
Give me a minute.
So I focus my attention on that. I've answered the question, and now I'm back with you instead of trying to multitask, so to speak, and hear and then miss what you're saying. So again, that's not like it's just moving the present moment. I was presently talking to you. I have this interruption come in. That's okay. That's not being in the present. I'm not so present. It's okay. But now staying in the present moment is me being honest with you and going, hey, dude, I need to answer this real quickly.
Or you're going to be distracted anyway. So no sense pretending. Let's just cut to the... Well, you just said a couple things right there that I think are giant. If I can not let them go. And one is attention. Mm-hmm. I mean, isn't this really about being able to know what our attention is, be aware of it, and then be masters of it, and say I can choose where I put my attention. And I think the purpose or the principle of mindfulness or meditation or living in the moment is, if you have a choice, and we do, it's probably best to put your attention on now. Like given all the things that can happen and can be done and can be controlled, you your attention is a very valuable resource, and it's how you do anything in life, right? And so, like you said, by paying attention to what you're paying attention to, that's the mastery of self.
Yeah. I really like that. So and I think you said such a key word there is you choose. You can choose where you put your attention.
It may take practice.
Right.
But
and it's always going to take practice, and it would never end. And that goes back to chop wood, carry water.
Yep.
You become aware that you can choose to where your attention goes. Now you got to chop the wood and carry the water every time you're doing it.
You don't sit on the throne of like attention king and be like, I can do whatever. You still have to practice.
That's what you still have to do it.
Maybe this helps other people because it blew my mind. But when I used to think it was so dumb and arrogant that doctors and lawyers talked about their practice. And I would be like, you're a doctor. So you don't know what you're doing? Am I just practice for you? So my gallbladder, you may screw it up because you're not very good, but you're going to get better for like the next guy? And I don't know. I just thought that was the weirdest thing. But then I got into meditation and I realized that, it's a practice. I'm just practicing. And it's the same thing with attention. You practice every day and you get better, but you never master it. And so that whole idea of practice, like, is one of those things where I regret being such a fool in my past.
It was that you just didn't really understand.
I did. Well,
Yeah.
it's like a lot of these things we're talking about. We don't understand what a lot of meditation, attention, awareness, present moment is. We made assumptions. They're wrong.
Yeah, and not to get off.
That was
not to sidetrack. No, because that's on. But I think what's interesting about that is what could be called the negativity bias, right? Because if that doctor has performed, I don't know, 1,000 gallbladder surgeries, maybe that's. I mean, for some, maybe that's a realistic number. I don't know.
Is. I don't know.
Maybe it's 100. It doesn't matter. I mean, of course, you would probably want to go to the doctor to perform 1,000 over 100.
But it's probably a normal curve, though, right? You want to hit somebody in the bell.
Yeah. Well, and the guy though that performed 1,000 one time was at 100, right? Mm-hmm. And it could be. And here's the thing, though: if one time something went astray with that doctor, that would be what the story would be.
This is the perfect metaphor for what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so mindfulness living in the moment is not about, you have to simultaneously consider the future and the past in that moment.
Yeah.
Like you were saying before.
Yeah.
It isn't absent. And that's why it's not selfishness. That's why it's not glib. It's not disrespectful. You know, it is a practice, and it is the intent of it is, and I swear it goes up to somewhere at the very top of the I exist is the first or whatever. Somewhere is a split that's basically I am an individual and I am part of the community.
Yeah.
And so this is no different. You can't live in the moment as a selfish individual. You can, but that's not what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think because you'll find, that you're at that point when you're living selfishly only, and most people aren't living selfishly only, but there's probably a level of it, and that is their kind of base. Their base state, right? That's where they gravitate back to that level, But most people, probably care about something else. Even maybe it's as simple as a plant in their house, or they at least have a goldfish, or their car, right, where they care. And then, of course, a lot of people, it's a state of development where they go. Then, for a lot of people, they'll kind of come out of that selfish level and it's not just necessarily selfish, because it could be kind of like a self-centered, so it's not like they're like selfish and greedy wanting from themselves. Just that they think of themselves without thinking of the other, right?
Yeah, not selfish, but
self-centered, self-focused,
and not self-aware.
And then so if you have, for a lot of people when they have kids, that's where they develop that. Then too. That's what's happened.
That's interesting.
And so. It was interesting. You said something about like it's simultaneously the past and the future coming together. The way I said that in my book is that the present moment could be thought of as the eternal moment of now, right? And what that is, it's when the past merges with all of the past merges with the endless possibilities of the future, and they're endless. It's simply endless.
You wrote that. That's But that may have been where I have gotten sort of obsessed with this idea that it's all simultaneous, right? It's almost like there's no time. There's no past, future, or present, because it is all...
Right, yeah. Well, of course, and that's, God, time's like such a big one.
But I like what you just said. They coexist, but they're separate. It's the same thing. It's the same model of this simultaneous...
Well, and everything that you were.
Duality.
So everything that, let's say it this way, not everything that you were, everything that you are in this moment, you at this moment transcend and include all of those.
That's
right. You know what I mean? You've gone about. Now, I guess I say that everyone transcends and includes. I guess it could be possible that you would take the Darth Vader move,
Shit,
where you have
faster, yeah.
gone past, and now you're going back a level to selfishly to my group only. Because so something like that, if you were talking about that in stages of development, from an egocentric level of development to an ethnocentric level of development to a world-centric only. Just use those 3 levels. Darth Vader went from world-centric, right?
Yeah.
Or universe-centric. He was universe-centric
Right,
to back to ethnocentric.
Yeah.
It was that, that group.
And I would say that what you just described is why we see bad people. Like, not to tangent, but the good and evil argument. I mean, the people that we would call evil are probably people that did that, right? They made it to some level, and some trauma happens that pushes you back developmentally to a more ethnocentric and desperate position where you...
And Darth Vader thought he was right.
It's funny. I just watched the 3rd episode.
Right, awesome.
The 4th, and I'd forgotten how terrible that scene is. I mean, I didn't like it originally because of the actor, and it just seems so cheesy. But the story, is great. That he struggled with that shift backward.
So you're talking like 3rd episode is
when he burns up in the fire.
Yeah. We're going in literal, right, chronology. Yeah, just making sure, right, how to talk about. Depending on how old you are, how you view the Star Wars various trilogies, right? Yeah.
Well, anyway, but that's a good example.
So, dude, I think we didn't plan on going there at all, and I want to still talk about other ways to stay present. But the Star Wars trilogy, starting with the film that was in 1977, which is a complete side note. Complete side note. Yeah. So that was episode 4, which they called it episode 4 at the time too,
right.
didn't they?
And I'm still not sure they had the first ones written.
Okay. That may be true. So complete side note first on that. I read yesterday, and so I would like to know if this is true. I did zero research. But at the time when the first Star Wars came out in 77, that the guillotine was still in France, it was the execution, the state. Yes, it was still in use in 77. Now, I did not look that up, but this was somebody that would post something that normally I would think is a reliable source.
Yeah.
Then he's not just, making stuff up.
Wow.
And he was sharing it anyways. But anyways, okay, so side note on that. But so the original...
If you look at the special effects in that movie and how rudimentary they were, it's not hard to believe that
that it was still going on. It was still going on. But it's amazing because you think, so that is in less than our lifetimes, and probably, honestly, within many of the lifetimes of people that are listening to this, is that was still legalized. Like, that was the way they did it.
Well, a guy just chose firing range in, South Carolina instead of the gas chamber, and
that's what they did.
Cool.
And that's what they did. Whole another set of shows. But so on the present moment and the past, with the idea of the eternal moment of now, with the past merging with the endless possibility of the future, Star Wars is a great way to think about kind of time in general. Because, when New Hope came out, and of course we were younger at the time, but, my dad would have been in his 50s, late 40s, I guess, at the time. And, he would have been in his late 40s. So he'd been about our age when that came out.
Right.
And, so he would have had a perspective on it and maybe would have been able to think that. But, Star Wars started, and I didn't question, well, what happened before this one?
Yeah, right. You didn't need the story arc.
And then, and then Empire Strikes Back happens. And that makes sense to somebody who's probably, Empire Strikes Back 81, something like that, right? So, now I'm a little...
And then Return of the Jedi came out quickly after.
Yeah. And so, so that made sense then as for that young mind of mine at the time. It was linear progression. It goes, well, then they come back out with episode 1, and it's just like, oh, yeah, stuff would have happened before that.
Yeah, maybe Darth Vader would have been a kid.
Right, yeah. And then, okay, but that Star Wars episode doesn't show the beginning of time. Right? It's set up. They said they're done, but we could go back.
Infinite.
Right. We could go back and have what happened before that.
Yeah.
So Star Wars, I think the whole thing said they're not doing 3 more, but that could be the next 3. Yeah. Right? They could do the next 3. And now there are
Oh, the
you can never go
spin-offs.
wrong talking about Star Wars.
No, you can't. I mean, I can't.
Kenobi's coming out here, and of course, by the time we show this, Kenobi might already be out. But all right, so that's just something about just the idea of time that you just realize like, oh, you can go back and you can go back and you go back, and yes, there would be a definitive start somewhere. I guess.
Yeah, man. Well, I don't even know about that. I don't care.
Yeah.
I just look at it as. It's funny. I think about this in ecology. There's a relative scope for everything, right? So if you're interested in an ant hill. And I say people use the word scale a lot of times to mean scope. Scope is just grain size over extent, right? So think about TV set. How many pixels your TV set has compared to how big it is going to determine the resolution and how good the picture is. If it's a giant TV, but it's got big pixels, it's going to look grainy as crap. But you could have that same ratio in a smaller TV and it would look good. And
It would look okay.
if you're
right.
interested
That's
in
a good way to think about
an
that.
anthill in your yard, you don't really care. You don't care about the continent of North America. That's probably way bigger than you need to look.
Right.
And you probably don't care about like quirks because you don't need to look that fine to see. But you do need to look like at however far that ant can walk and however many other ant hills it might be connected to food wise. And some spatial scale that's a lot bigger than the ant hill, but not too much bigger. And then at some smaller level than the ant themselves, like maybe the molecules inside of the food that they're eating and how that affects their bodies and their physiology, right? So there's a scope, and I think that goes for time. So if you're talking about now, some degree of later and some degree of then are going to kind of move in a sphere, right, surrounding that are kind of relevant. And it, depending on the issue that you're talking about in the moment of time, that sphere could be bigger or smaller.
Right.
So that's how I look. I don't care if it's got a starter, and all I know is
Yeah. Well, and
What
of
matters.
course, that's perfect, dude. That's perfect because that puts us within the present moment.
right.
That puts us in the present moment.
Which is not now. It's
right.
the present moment.
Yeah, and it's going on. And then everything we do right now, this is something that I've said too in the past, is that the road to the future goes through the present moment. Whatever we do here today, individually and collectively, that's going to impact us down the road. And that's actually karma. Not to get into that, but there would be different levels of then karma. There's going to be instant karma, right? If like if like a kid
You do the chest compressions on a guy
Yeah.
and bring him back to life.
Okay, right. Yeah, something happened, right? Instant, right? There was an action and a result, and so a lot of times we think of karma as the negative thing, but so it's like if you
Didn't do or
punch this kid in the face during school lunch, that kid might punch you back, right? You got
or
instant
you might break your foot on the way
Yeah.
home from school because
instant karma. Well, but there was a reaction of what happened because of whatever.
Gotcha.
Now, and then there's going to be like a reasonable like next level of karma. This is what you're just talking about. Next level of karma. Our actions right now are impacting the future, somewhat. And of course,
yeah.
that's like goes into like the whole global climate crisis.
Yeah, the butterfly effect thing.
Right.
You know,
Well, that too,
the
yeah.
bigger like, and that is a excellent chunk of evidence for this we're all connected thing. Like,
Right.
how can you not?
Yeah,
See
we're all
that.
connected. Yeah.
But yeah, so I see it as like this multi-dimensional that includes space and time because again, it's so hard not to see it like that. But it's also easy to live outside of that model in the literal world where it's like, well, I have to go to work and I don't want to go to work. And so you're thinking about how much work is going to suck. And then you go into work and guess what? The next 8 hours of your life suck because you have this negativity bias. And it's not easy to just go, instead, work's going to be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so weird.
Yeah, the whole that's an interesting thing. So that, dude, you brought up another way that some people can help stay present, and that's basically being thankful in the moment, right? And
Gratitude.
so, yeah, so that's one way, and we can talk more about that. One thing that worked for me, and I think this is worth saying, and this developed out of what could really be called depression state that I was in. Not that I would have been ever diagnosed at the time as clinically depressed, and I think that's something I'm not like discrediting that like to get to, but I was in a state a mental state that I would have said that if you would have asked me that
Yeah,
day, I would have said
right.
I was depressed. And it was over a situation where had been in a relationship and the relationship ended, and not the way I wanted it to, of course, at the time. And so I was depressed. And one of the ways that helped me come out of that was I would focus my attention very intently on the activity of what I was doing. And I thought of it almost as moving like a stage actor. Right. So because the stage actors have to move together correctly, right? Like they can't not be where they need to be for it. So I was doing whatever I was doing. I'm sweeping the floor. I'm sweeping the floor. I'm sweeping the floor. I'm washing the dishes. I'm washing the dishes. And I focused my attention on that. Now, it was almost like I was combining, really, to a degree, a mantra, which I would say that's not exactly a mantra, but the idea of a repetition in my mind, the repetition in my mind, I'm sweeping the floor, I'm sweeping the floor, I'm sweeping the floor, with the presence of the action, I'm doing the action. And while I was doing that then, I wasn't thinking about how my life wasn't the way I had thought it was going to be.
And adding fuel to the fire.
and so that helped me focus my attention, very greatly, basically on it. And it was
on a neutral.
On just neutral things, and that was even rooted in I had been bartending for quite some time, and this was interesting because I was a very present bartender out of necessity when I first started. Now, I should say it's almost out of fear of not knowing what I was doing.
Yeah, or being called out.
So I wanted to have everything done. So that way, if I needed to look up a drink recipe, and mind you, this is even pre-cell phone internet, like you didn't have plus even if a job would let you build, or even the computers right now, a lot of computers just have those recipes right in them, but like that was pre that time, and so I wanted to have everything done, but I had learned then to focus very intently on these are all the things I need to do, right? And so I'd focus that, and then I took that into this time then when I was in this, for lack of a better term, depression. And that helped me come out of it. Now, that still took time, but that was a great way where I was like, oh, I'm controlling what I'm thinking. Wow. I'm choosing what I'm thinking. Am I thinking about the situation that I'm unhappy with? The other person is probably happy with now because they made that choice to split like at the time. And of course, then it's, you've been there now too. Of course, it's like you look back and you're like kind of thankful that happened.
Right. Well, it's really funny because you say it like it's so easy. And this is one of my big criticisms of this kind of work is that it sounds so easy in theory. And it is really a simple mechanism. You thought about what you were doing instead of thinking about how much this other thing sucked.
Right.
That's hard to do, but I think it's part of it is because we don't believe it's going to work.
Right.
Because it doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah.
You still think I'm just avoiding the problem.
Yeah.
When it's going to come back. This problem is still out there to get me. It's this big monster, and I'm just sort of hiding in the closet. Eventually, I have to open the door, and it's going to be there. But I actually think that's not true.
Yeah. Well, and so for me at the time, there was a degree where I would say, I think it was really important that somehow I was connecting my personal worth, my personal value as a human to whether I was in that relationship. And so I didn't truly, what I would say is truly love myself. Now, I wasn't trying to harm myself in any way at the time. And of course, that's something that does happen for people, but I was letting my lack of, that I had been broken up with, that makes me not worthy, so to speak. It
defines you somehow.
And then, it was later, shortly thereafter though, really, but I've been practicing the present moment of doing what I was doing. And again, I was very good at that in my job, thankfully, and bartending allowed me to do that too, where I could focus what I was doing there. And focus my attention. And I kind of came then to a point where I literally said to myself, I was driving down a road, and I'll never forget it. I said, I truly try to be a good person. Now, of course, we could debate what that exactly means, but I was trying to be a good person. I was trying to not, I wouldn't have even said this at the time. I was not trying, I did not want to create, inflict suffering on anyone or anything. I didn't want my actions to impact the world, as difficult as that is. That's a whole nother story. I didn't want my actions to impact somebody harmfully, across the globe.
Yeah,
Or,
right.
like I truly,
Right,
I am
sorry.
truly trying my best to make the best decisions possible, right? And I deserve love, and I deserve a good person because like I'm trying hard. Like I'm doing that. Like I'm trying to be a good person.
That's awesome.
And it was at that moment then that I really like honestly like loved myself for what I was trying to be. And I had realized, and again, I wouldn't have been able to put this in words at the time, but I had realized that it was like I choose my actions. I'm the one that does it. It has nothing to do with anything else that happens. And so I have to, and you said this earlier, like we choose where to put our attention. So I was choosing, the attention. I'm trying to be a good person. And then it was really shortly after that I met my wife now, Shelley, that it made it so I was more ready to be in that relationship.
Absolutely, sure.
Because she wasn't making me happy, nor was anybody I'd ever been with before making me happy. It is up to me to be that. And the whole happy thing, that's a whole discussion in itself.
Like happy in quotes.
But like it was, where am I putting my attention and how do I want to be? And I can only control me. No matter what that other person does to me, says to me, or whatever, I control my end of it. Now, and certainly somebody can inflict literal physical harm on you. Mm-hmm. And then, that's how do I react to that?
Yeah, right,
that's a tough situation.
Absolutely.
But no matter what happens, I control my end, not the other end. And that was a big, big lesson for me.
I've actually, that's amazing that you ended up telling that story today, because I've actually wondered if there was a moment like that, or like how it went down with you, because I'm still not there, because I still poke holes in the part of the theory that says, because I'm trying, therefore, what follows is that I am worthy of love. Like, I don't see the continuity of that equation, which it might just be my endless negativity bias, scientific training of like always doubting until there's some form of evidence that. But in that case, it's kind of like meditation. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
I don't know that there has to be any evidence that you are worthy of love necessarily follows from, well, I'm trying.
Yeah.
Like it almost seems absurd, but that's something that's built into me, that is this giant wall, preventing me from getting into that. And in a lot of ways, I'm jealous, that you are able to just sort of say, A causes B, and so I don't have to worry about it anymore. But that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, so
stuff.
in that present moment, I think the important thing to just constantly remind yourself, and this is so it has to become like kind of like a background program running in your mind.
You were running this program in your mind.
Yeah.
You haven't just left that behind.
Yeah, right. And you're constantly running the program that, okay, this person, like I am feeling this way, whatever happened. My next thing I do, my next thought, my next words, my next action come from me no matter what they did. No matter what they did. Now, what they did impacts that, certainly. But, like, do I want to... There's that great scene in You've Got Mail with Meg Ryan where she says... He says she kind of like cuts him down. Yeah. She's been like, I think he uses the term zingers at him. And she starts saying, and she's like, gets her mouth super dramatic and like covers her mouth, right? Because she's like, why do you, makes me say whatever? And it was at that moment, really, right? She realized like, wait a minute, it doesn't matter what he does. I don't want to behave this way. And almost everybody probably has, if they haven't had this experience 1,000 times, they've had it at least once where they have acted away, like somebody did something and then they acted away or said something and then they feel bad. It's not the other person that they're even mad at, disappointed with, or whatever. They're mad at themselves.
Oh yeah, I do that all the time.
For doing that, right?
Yeah,
it's like, why did I say that? Why did I do that?
Especially more so lately. Like in any conversation I have lately, I'm sort of like afterwards. I'm like, I wasn't in integrity. How did that come out of my mouth? That was the old me, or that's an old habit.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of change.
Yeah, well, it is. And again, dude, we're going to get these constantly. Every moment is going to be a new moment, a new opportunity to demonstrate this. This is why I say that we have this moment to demonstrate our true nature.
Yeah.
What is your true nature? Do you want to be greedy, selfish, gluttonous, or do you want to be loving and whatever that means? You know, generous and compassion. We've talked a little bit about that. I think, like, ideally, we would live in a state of existence, not like state of a country, but we would live, you know, in a collective state where we don't need compassion because people's needs are met. But we don't. That's not where we live. So we didn't. So I want to live my life out of love. I want to act. I want to be kind. I want to be harmless in terms of hurting other people. You know, like directly, like that. That's my impact on them. I want to be generous. I want to be compassionate. I want to have sympathy. I want to demonstrate all these things that could fall under the broad umbrella of demonstrating love. And I want to do that. So that's my true nature. That's what I want to come back to. And anytime I'm not that, which I wasn't this past week with my mom, like I wasn't patient with my mom, right, among other things. So I wasn't displaying compassion towards her then. She says these things, and so it could be one of two ways. I could just maybe literally disagree with what her take on it is, and that happens plenty. But a lot of times, and the case with my mom is, she was contradicting her own beliefs that I know to be true from 50 years of experience.
And that's just hard to watch.
Yeah.
No matter who it is or what you're doing.
But again, you know, she said what she said. I can only control my end. And I did. I mean, I was, you know, I wouldn't really say I lost my temper, but I lost my patience. I lost my patience with her immediately.
And you
know?
fell off of the
and I fell off of where I would want to be. And is that the way I would have wanted somebody to treat me? Which is what I always talk about, the idea of reverse the roles. Reverse the roles. Well, how would you want to be treated? You're not demonstrating whatever thing, or somebody thinks that, you know, you better be open to it, that you might be wrong or might not understanding something. And so I would want them, but I would want them to be patient with me. And was I patient with her? No. You know, but so you one more thing.
Well,
endless, or you know, the past that merges with the endless possibility of the future. I'm going to have more chances. I talked to my mother yesterday.
Yeah, right.
We got along. You know, I apologize for my part of, you know, the conversation and the way I wasn't patient with her. And you move forward.
Yeah,
because that's the option.
Well, and it's a couple of things you say there, because I mean, this is right on point for where I still am and where I've kind of still beat myself up for not being over, and that is everything you said about representing love, compassion, all that stuff that what you just said, which is great. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that. It also applies to you as an individual. And I think I don't know if other people do this, miss that point. It's like you said before, there's no loophole in the golden rule. You have to want to treat yourself well. Like, that's part of it. And so all of this self-compassion, all of this loving kindness, all of this openness to the world and not wanting ill will, that all has to apply inward also. And I miss that. And, you know, so you end up, that's like the people pleasers and the codependents of the world sort of just, they don't understand that part of the equation. They're too busy trying to make sure that the rest of the world is showered in love. And I think that's a massive, and the you also demonstrated, like in that conversation with your mom, I think a thing people do, and I do, is you have that conversation, you don't perform well, and then you insert the catastrophic thinking and go, they're going to abandon me, they're not going to love me, I'm a terrible person, shame spiral, and that sort of keeps you from doing things like being in the moment and meditating. And that's a scary
absolutely
place to be, and it perpetuates itself.
And my mom literally said, so obviously she had thought of that when we talked yesterday the second time. She said, I just want to make sure that like it never gets to a point where like we just don't talk anymore. And it's like, well, I mean, awesome. From my perspective, that's not, we're not close to that.
But it is
like,
a fear.
Yeah, but it's right.
A very real Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
kind of fear.
Yeah, yeah. You know, so dude, I think, man, that is maybe the perfect spot to wrap up.
I mean,
because let's start next show talking about what does it mean to really love yourself? What does it really
absolutely.
mean?
I mean, that would
Yeah.
be an episode that's basically therapy for me, but I'm down with that.
I think it would be therapy for me too. It's good for all of us.
Well, and yes, very great idea. That's a critical thing.
Yeah, and so just to wrap up today, I think, you know, it's always a present moment. You're always going to come back to this is the only opportunity I have to truly demonstrate what I call my true nature, what Neale Donald Walsch says, who and what I want to be, right? It's this moment. So it doesn't matter what anybody has done. It doesn't matter what any of the possibilities I think are in my mind, right? But at the same time, those infinite possibilities can motivate me. What do I want? Do I want to live in a world that is peace in terms of no violence? Yes, I do. Well, how do I want to demonstrate that then?
Man, that's incredible. Well done, Paul.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think that was a great show. Good talk on both of that.
Yeah.
Right on.
Really hit our stride.
Thank you.